Hello, everybody. My name is Alexander Jeffery. I'm one of the co-founders of Crafty. We're a short film channel that celebrates heart-driven short films in both the narrative and the nonfiction space. And today, I'm sitting down with one of our filmmakers, Mary McDade, and her short film is Ms.Blue. This is really exciting. So you are the second film ever on Crafty, and you're our first Q&A for the channel. So thank you so much for doing this and for sharing your beautiful work with us.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. So happy that my work is going to be seen by more people. And yes, thank you.
So it's a beautiful film, and I've seen it many times now at different film festivals, and of course where it premiered at the Louisiana Film Prize. And like my immediate reaction when I saw this film is that it's almost like a poem. I mean, I was really curious what your inspiration for this story was.
Yes, so I was actually inspired by my own grandmother, who I sort of always wondered what she did with her days, especially later in her life. And she talked to this cat all the time that she had, this outdoor cat. And I was just so fascinated by that because she always had such a hard exterior. And I could tell that she had been a person who had been through a lot, and was sort of hard on the outside but soft on the inside. And so that's sort of where the inspiration for Miss Blue came from, is I wanted to tell the story of this woman who sits on her porch all day and watches the world around her, but the stories and things that have happened to her are kind of kept in, and she has this hard exterior that, comes out in both ways when she talks to this neighborhood cat that she sees all the time. Yeah, so that's pretty much where the inspiration came from.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. And of course, like this movie could not exist without the beautiful performance from Adela, and I was curious how you met her.
Right. So I actually met her on another project I was working on. I was actually a camera operator on it, and I was filming her performance one night. It was this short that they were trying to turn into a series. It was longer, and she had a small role in it, but also a very big role. She was sort of the leader of this hippie commune in the woods. And there's a scene where she was just supposed to be looking out at the commune as they're celebrating. And she just brought this performance to this very short scene that was just so moving and complex and really stuck with me. And ever since then, I had been wanting to just write a solo project for her. And so that's sort of where the inspiration, that's how I got in touch with her. And, even though Miss Blue is inspired by my own story, it's also inspired by her and what I know that she could bring to the role, with her own personality and her own style.
Amazing. And how do you work as a director? Are you a storyboard person, or are you more like let the cinematographer set up the shot and you're working with the performance, or what does your sort of on-set dynamic look like?
Yeah, I'm actually not a huge storyboard person, but I think that's because I already work in camera. That's sort of my day job, is I'm a camera assistant, and so I'm always thinking about camera no matter what. And my cinematographer, who I work with frequently, he just sort of reads my mind. We talk about the script a lot,
Hmm.
and we break down all of the shots that we want. And so when it comes to the day, we already both have the exact same storyboard in our own brains, even though we never physically storyboarded anything. And yeah, and then pretty much on the day, I just let him set up the shots and I stick with the actors, because by that point we've talked about it so much that it's pretty much second nature. And then he knows the poetic shots that I like to get as well. And so he'll filter those in throughout the day, which is actually really helpful because some of those moments of just when we're seeing Adela's hands
Hmm.
or we're seeing the flowers or her surroundings, he actually shot those moments while I was talking with her.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
that's sort of like our secret plan sometimes when we go to set is I'll just be talking with the actors and getting into the scene, and he'll just sort of start shooting moments that feel natural and look natural, that'll, bring the poetry to the film. Basically B-roll, but, it's only one camera. So,
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. Um, well, we can't really talk about this film without talking about the color blue.
right.
The house, the production design, the costume, of course, the blueberries. So talk about the color blue and sort of what that means to you and what that means to the film.
Yeah. So, I this film was shot in New Orleans, and I live in New Orleans. And there are very vibrant colors in New Orleans on all of the houses. And from the beginning, I knew that I wanted a blue house. I felt like it needed a blue house, and I wanted my character to be named Ms.Blue. For a very obvious reason. She's a very blue person inside and on the outside, but I still wanted her to have this unique style that, even though she was sort of, like I said, hard on the outside and soft on the inside, she needed to have something that really made her fit into her environment. And having her also match her environment sort of goes along with her character just sort of blending into, what this little world that she's created for herself. And then blueberries are, a summer fruit that, at least growing up in Arkansas, where I'm from, we'd eat them all the time. And, I was like, she's gotta be munching on something. So I picked blueberries because it was very heat, summer oriented, and of course went along with the theme.
That's awesome. So, like, nobody would ever know this from watching the film, but just because I know a little bit about the behind the scenes, I know you shot this during COVID, and you sort of
Yes.
inadvertently have the perfect COVID movie because she's outside alone on a porch, and there's no other characters that she's interacting with besides the cat. So, was that sort of built into the creative when you were talking about like how we're going to make a movie during COVID?
Absolutely. Yes, I was actually in the process of making another much longer short film when COVID hit. And so I was getting very artistically frustrated. And so I was like, I'm gonna write a 4-page script. I'm gonna write it with Adele in mind. And so from the beginning, yes, this script was absolutely um, birthed from the restrictions of COVID. And we shot it on a 12:1 zoom lens, shot everything on a zoom lens. And so we were actually very far away from her when we were shooting. And yeah, and she was able to be outside. There was only about, four of us, six of us there total. And yeah, completely built the film around COVID, not having to be too close to her. And yeah.
That's so cool. And like I said, like you would never know it. It's sort of it definitely goes beyond thinking it's a COVID film, but it's just cool that you were able to sort of creatively make something that you wanted to make within those constraints. I think that's really awesome. And
Thank you.
most important question: how were you able to get the cat to do what you wanted it to do?
Right. So the cat, I sort of went on a friend search of who has a cat that they're willing to put in a film.
Uh-huh.
And I had a friend pop up and say, "Hey, I actually have a cat that's trained on a leash." And I was like, "Great. That is perfect." Um, and so my friend Paige brought out her cat Gucci, and Adela and the cat were not there at the same time. Adela left, and then the cat came out, and we just got very specific shots with the cat.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, and that was it. So we basically shot the cat for probably half an hour, and then it was wrapped, and we just and that was it.
That's awesome. No pickups needed. Um,
Yeah.
so did Adela, was she doing kind of like the Luke Skywalker acting against a stick that was Yoda? Like was she just was it like her eye line was just like a stick or something?
Yes, it was a rock. It was a
Okay.
rock that we moved around.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Well, I've got one more question related to Miss Blue, and then I've got some generic filmmaking questions for you.
Okay, great.
for our audience. But so my question that I like to ask everybody is, I think the film is absolutely beautiful and perfect in every way. But if you could have a time machine and go back and change one thing about the production or post or anything, what would you change?
Oh man, that's a big question too because since the movie has been made, Adela has actually passed away.
That's right.
So I would make it longer. I think I would have written a 15-page script and just spent more time with Adela and wrote more scenes for her because I just really enjoyed working with her, and she gave me a lot of confidence as a director because she brought so much to the character, and she was so willing to work with me in such a challenging time of just COVID
Yeah.
and filmmaking in general. So if I were to do it again, I would do it exactly the same, but longer and more in depth.
That's awesome. That's the perfect answer. Uh, so actually, I lied. I have one more film Miss Blue related question because I have to ask about the song. I saw in the credits that it's credited as just a piece of music that already existed.
Yes.
So how did you find that piece of music and work with the composer of that music to get rights to it for the film? Because it sets the tone so perfectly from like the first few seconds. Like you're immediately in this world, with the music.
Yeah. So the song is from an artist, Helen Gillet, who's a local New Orleans artist, New Orleans based, and she is one of my favorite artists. Definitely my favorite artist in New Orleans, and one of my favorite artists in general. And I really wanted to use a piece of her music that already existed with this film, and so I pretty much just went down and just started once I had the film, I just started imagining what song was really going to work.
Mm.
And I reached out to her and sent her the film, sent her the cut. I actually went ahead and put the music in so she could see the cut with her song.
Oh, cool.
And then she agreed to it. And she was like, yes, absolutely. And that's pretty much how it happened. And now she's composed music for my next short, like an original score.
Oh, wow.
Um, so I'm so happy that I had the confidence to actually reach out to her in the beginning.
That's amazing. I love when stuff like that happens, where you're a fan of somebody's work and then they become a collaborator. That's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sweet. Um, okay, so some generic like filmmaking questions for you. Uh, what advice would you give to a young filmmaker that's just getting started or like very early in their career? Like maybe they've made one or two things on their iPhone. They're, wanting to get to the next step or the next level in their career.
Um, I would say don't be afraid to have your hands in multiple projects at once. Because for me, that's what helps me build the most confidence because it's really easy to not be confident about your work in our industry.
Mm.
And so I find it, if I'm feeling like, oh, I have this short and it didn't get into this festival, if I'm feeling down about that, I'll be like, okay, but what can I do right now to help me further myself in the future? And so that's sort of what I always do as I have, the same thing with how Miss Blue developed. I was pretty down about not being able to move forward in production with my short. And so I was like, well, what can I do in the meantime? I'm going to write this other short that I know I can accomplish, that I know I can do right now. And so I would say, don't be afraid to have your hands in multiple things and be realistic with what you can accomplish right now. Because, if you can't accomplish shooting a feature and you can't afford it, then you don't have to do that. You will always have another project. I think sometimes, especially in film school, it's easy to get caught up in making something completely perfect when it's more important to move on to the next thing.
That's great advice. I 100% second that. That's awesome. Um, what film or a couple films would you say that you revisit the most? Not necessarily your favorite films, but ones that you find yourself going back to.
Right. So I am a big Terrence Malick fan,
Mm.
specifically Tree of Life, because what he's able to do with the visual poetry of that film is just has always been astonishing to me and new and fresh every time I see it. So I'm a big fan of his work. And other films I return to, I feel like I find myself just all over the board sometimes. Like sometimes I'm in a mood to just like really watch Rosemary's Baby and study it,
Uh-huh.
and then, try to work on like a horror script.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then other times I'm in a Terrence Malick mood. And then other times, I really want to watch Moonlight. It just
Mm.
depends. I feel like it depends on whatever I'm working at in the moment. Um, and yeah, yeah.
All really good movies. And you'd mentioned the short that you were working on, which kind of leads me to my last question for you, which is what's next? Like, where can, what are you working on? Where can we find your next work? What's going on post Miss Blue for you?
Yeah, so I finally finished the short that I actually started production on at the beginning of COVID.
Oh, awesome.
Um,
I
and
was
I
wondering if it
am
was the same one, so it was.
same one, although it changed a lot. I was able to, really edit and hone it down to what I wanted to. So I hope to start submitting that mid-May to festivals. And I've also written my first feature, and I really hope to be in production for that, within the next 2 years. Right now, my work, you can find me on Vimeo. I also post my social is pretty much just Instagram. And yeah, I hope to have my next short on Vimeo too within the year once I run the festival route that I hope to get into. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at.
That's awesome. Super exciting. And thank you so much for sharing Miss Blue with us, with our audience. And we wish you the very best in everything that you're doing going forward. And what a beautiful film. And of course, one more shout out to Adela, who I know has since passed, but man, she is just remarkable in this film.
Yeah, she's definitely a force.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.